What if I told you that the whole world feels like my home? And what if I said that every couple of years I just pack up my things and I move to a different country with new cultures, languages, and amazing life experiences? Well, this has been my life as an international school teacher, and it could be yours too if you want. Here's just a little bit of my story. Living and working abroad is a dream of many. With the rise of the digital nomad movement, it's become more and more accessible to anyone with a laptop. But for teachers, it isn't such a new thing. For many years, international teachers from around the globe have had opportunities to teach and share their knowledge abroad. So what inspires someone to become an international teacher? I'm an Australian who got into teaching after being bored with studying accounting. I discovered a passion for working with kids when I dropped out of uni, moved home, and I started coaching a soccer team. After going back to uni, getting a teaching degree, I taught economics and humanities in Australia for 6 years. But I found out about the idea of teaching at international schools while I was on a trip to Vietnam when I met some American teachers who were working in China. On a later trip to the Philippines, I decided to submit my resume to a school there, and this led to my first international teaching job. So where have I taught and what's it been like? I started in the Philippines, and I've since worked in Singapore, twice in fact, Hong Kong twice, and also China, and I'm currently in Bangkok, Thailand. But I'm already considering where I might go next. The Philippines was a great place for learning to adapt and for learning patience. Attitudes towards time can be a little bit different. We often refer to Philippine time whenever thinking about something that would take a little bit longer or if someone was running late. People are very relaxed there, but they also love to socialise, so it's actually really easy to make local friends. I also learned a fair bit of the local language called Tagalog, which was quite fun, but it's actually harder to learn when everyone there speaks English already. I then moved to Singapore, which was a place that I really wanted to try out. Singapore was obviously much more developed and more efficient, but it was actually harder to make local friends. I struggled to settle in at first, in fact, and it felt kind of too serious. But once I met more people, began to socialise, and I found sort of the expat community, which centred mainly on watching sports and finding the best happy hour. Next was China, and that was all about cultural experiences and overcoming language barriers, as virtually nobody spoke English when I was there. I actually learned a lot of Mandarin, and especially in the market when buying food. Being virtually forced to use Mandarin every single day made learning it much easier. In a way, every day was actually a challenge, but it was a really nice challenge. There was a great sense of achievement in accomplishing just simple things through using a second language. It's actually a shame that I forgot most of the Mandarin that I'd learned in China when I moved to Hong Kong, where English is much more widely spoken and the second language was Cantonese. I found Hong Kong to be like the best of both worlds from Singapore and China. It has the Chinese culture and the traditions, but most people also speak English. Most people don't realise that it has great diversity of geography and weather as well, and it has great hiking and great beaches. After 8 years, I came to consider Hong Kong to be my home. Unfortunately, COVID forced a lot of people to leave, and I was one of those. My next stop was Thailand, and Thailand's a step back to learning a new culture and new traditions. It's such a fascinating culture, a fascinating place, and there's just so much beauty here. I'd say, generally speaking, overseas teachers learn to be more accepting of differences, embrace new cultures, and mostly just go with the flow. You just can't ever say or think that the way things are done is wrong. It's just different. And that's what makes things interesting. It can be a life of great rewards, but also great challenges. The students I teach are amazing, and they come from such diverse backgrounds. At the moment, I'm actually teaching a lot of Thai students. But international schools often don't actually have any students who are from the country that you're working in. The most rewarding part of the job is probably just learning about the different backgrounds of the students and the different lives that they're living. But there are so many rewarding experiences, too many for me to mention here. My top one, though, is actually a very personal one. For both my daughters' graduation ceremonies, I was actually able to hug them on stage and hand them their diplomas. The most challenging experience as a teacher can sometimes be dealing with parents who have unrealistic expectations for their children. And I hate stereotypes, but a lot of my students would probably agree that their parents often set really, really high standards in terms of academic performance. There is also the interesting dilemma of whether or not to accept large gifts from parents. A few things have changed for me on this journey. One thing that has changed is that I recognise that wealthy, privileged expat kids often have incredible challenges that I may not have even considered before. Having not come from a wealthy background myself, I often thought that rich kids had it easy, but it's definitely not the case. Another is just the fact that you need to be so open-minded as you don't know how your own views may differ from those of your students. I once taught a girl from North Korea and I was teaching an economics lesson on capitalism. That was certainly interesting. There are also lots of cultural sensitivities that you have to consider. For example, the issues surrounding China, Hong Kong and Taiwan that I just really wouldn't quite understand. Every school and every curriculum is different. I would say being flexible is the most important thing. You can ask as many questions as you like in a job interview, but when you arrive at your new school, things can be quite different to what you expect. I've mentioned open-mindedness already, and this relates to dealing with both students and parents. But it can also relate to working with colleagues from different backgrounds who have differing beliefs. The opportunities are endless. There are international schools in nearly every corner of the world. China continues to add many international schools every year, though some are less international than others. There's still a huge demand for English. I've never actually taught English myself, but Asian parents really still want their kids to be proficient English speakers. I'd say since COVID, there may be more opportunities in certain places. Anyone who wants to start off in China, for example, will find heaps of opportunities there. It could be a great starting point for new international teachers. And there are some amazing international schools in China that pay enormous salaries. It's important to balance your personal and professional lives. One of the great things about working overseas is how connected the expat communities are, especially teachers. You can make friends for life. But people do leave, and you may not see them for years or even decades, but you know a reunion could be just around the corner and in any location. The other great thing is the holidays. I have many more days off in a year here in Thailand than I ever had before. The summer break is normally 6 or 7 weeks long, and there are short holidays throughout the year which give you plenty of opportunities to travel to nearby countries. But even just a long weekend could be an international trip. I can easily access Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos and Myanmar by land or by air, and really cheaply. Many of my colleagues take 3 or 4 international holidays each year. And the summer is a chance to travel to several countries in one trip. Living in a place rather than just holidaying there also gives rise to opportunities for attending events. When I was living in China, I went to the Harbin Ice Festival with my teacher friends. I also went to Beijing with colleagues to run the Great Wall of China half marathon. It was such a highlight of my time there. Of course, there can be some early struggles. First year homesickness can be tough. My first year in Singapore certainly was. I found myself counting the days to the next trip home to Australia to catch up with friends. But eventually your friends end up being where you are, as well as in many neighbouring countries. For me, well, there's always an Aussie pub, a cold beer and some sport on the big screen to cure any homesickness. Best places I've visited in Asia? All of the places that I've lived have actually been great, and these are also great places for people to visit. My favourite places that I've visited but not lived in are definitely Cambodia and Vietnam. It's a contest between these two for the friendliest people in the world, or at least from the places that I've travelled to. They're also really cheap, have incredible food, and in the case of Vietnam, some great beaches. Laos is also a beautiful place. There are quite a few misconceptions and stereotypes in the international teaching world. One misconception is that we all teach local students how to speak English. International schools are predominantly expat students, so every lesson, apart from languages, is taught in English. There are also Australian, British and American schools where the curriculum is the same as their home countries. There's this silly misconception that all Asian students are good at mathematics. Many of my students would tell you that that's definitely a myth. There's a perception that Chinese, Hong Kongers and Singaporeans are cold and lacking in personality. Definitely not true. There is also this misconception that when you live in Asia, you're actually somehow cut off from what's happening in the rest of the world, and that many things are lacking or inefficient or backward. But transportation, internet and phone services can be more efficient even in Thailand compared to Australia. First-timer advice. It's probably the best decision I've ever made. People will try to talk you out of it for sure. Don't listen. And don't give up in the first year, even if homesickness hits you. It will pass. Pretty soon the phrase going home will have a different meaning. The job search. There are hundreds of reasons why someone may or may not get offered a particular job that they apply for. Much of this is out of your control, so just persist and the right opportunity will arise. Just getting your foot in any door is better than none at all. But be open-minded, flexible and prepared for some early struggles. Most international schools offer 2-year contracts to start with and then maybe yearly contracts after that. It's best if you stay at least 2 years, as it can be a bit of a red flag for recruiters if you break a contract or move schools too often. But this still means that you can change countries every 2 years if you wish. I tend to look at every move as if it's a promotion, even if it's for the same type of job. It's a new place where you want to live and it's a new adventure waiting, so that's a promotion in my eyes. You will learn so much about yourself, about people and the world by just getting out and experiencing it. It will change your perspective on everything. It's up to you, so what are you waiting for? I really hope you got something useful out of this video. If so, please like and subscribe. Feel free to ask questions or leave comments, and I'll keep working on adding value for my fellow teachers.